Let's talk about the absolutely explosive chemistry between rival hockey players Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov from the series Heated Rivalry. But we're not just going to look at this as a romance, oh no. We're going to treat it like a physics problem, a really complex equation of massive forces, emotional energy, and, perfect timing. So let's dive in and figure out what makes this dynamic just so unbelievably compelling.
So what do I even mean by the physics of flirting? Well, think about it. We're talking about the fundamental forces that are basically running their entire relationship. It's this constant, intense push and pull. It's the perfectly timed orbits of their secret meetings. And it's the sheer amount of energy it takes to keep the whole thing from just imploding. This is the absolute heart of their incredible enemies to lovers story.
Okay, so what's the central principle here? What's driving this entire thing? It really all boils down to two incredibly powerful opposing forces. This conflict, this tug of war between their public roles and their private desires, well, that's the engine for literally everything that happens.
And these forces are so clear, so powerful. On one hand, you have this massive repulsion force. I mean, these guys are captains of rival teams. They're the faces of their franchises. Their careers, their reputations, everything is built on them being enemies. This professional hatred is just this giant force pushing them apart. But then, you've got this equally powerful attraction force. This magnetic, undeniable chemistry that has been pulling them together for years. It's just unstoppable. But here's where it gets really good. These forces don't just cancel each other out. They actually feed each other. The books make it crystal clear that the intensity of their on-ice rivalry is exactly what makes their secret meetings so incredibly hot. The danger, the animosity, it all becomes part of the attraction, not an obstacle to it.
And get this isn't just some convenient plot point. It's what makes the story feel so real. The author of the original book series, Rachel Reed, actually confirmed it. She said the dynamic was inspired by legendary NHL rivalries, like Sidney Crosby versus Alexander Ovechkin. That real-world tension is exactly what gives their fictional feeds such a high-stakes, authentic feel. Okay, so if those are the forces at play, how in the world do they even manage to get together? Well, their relationship isn't really a continuous thing. It's more like a series of high-stakes, perfectly timed events. You have to think of it less like a simple romance and more like orbital mechanics, where every single variable has to line up just right. Seriously, think of it like planets aligning. First, their team schedules have to bring them into the same orbit, the same city at the exact same time. Then, a critical window has to open up. This is usually during big league-wide events like all-star games or award shows where nobody would question them being in the same place. And finally, they have to move with incredible speed and absolute trust, shifting from bitter rivals to intimate partners in like an instant. It's a total high-wire act with zero room for error.
All right, so we've covered the external forces, their careers, the tricky logistics, but what about the internal stuff? What's going on inside their heads? Well, that's where we get to the ice and fire equation. It's all about the emotional energy that's created when their very different personalities clash.
So on one side, you have Shane Hollander. He's the ice. He's the golden boy of Canadian hockey, so controlled, so disciplined, and just hyper-focused on his career and his perfect reputation. His whole vibe is cool and measured. And then, on the other side, you have Ilya Rozanov. He's the fire. Passionate, volatile, wears his heart right on his sleeve. He just burns hotter, and it's that fire that is constantly threatening to melt Shane's icy exterior.
And this is where that equation gets really, really interesting, because you start to see this core imbalance that drives the whole story forward. For Shane, hockey is everything. It is his one and only obsession. But for Ilya, over time, the relationship itself starts to become the main priority. And that fundamental shift, that's what creates the internal pressure, the emotional steam that forces their dynamic to become so much more than just secret hookups.
Now let's talk about the single biggest barrier these two face. And trust me, it has nothing to do with a tough defenseman on the ice. It's the immense, crushing pressure of the closet, especially in the super masculine world of professional sports.
The defining feature of their entire relationship is silence. A forced public silence that just drains their emotional energy. But what's so fascinating is how that silence actually makes everything else more powerful. Because they can't say anything out loud. Every single private moment, every text, every shared glance across a crowded room carries this incredible weight. It becomes their only space for real honesty, and it makes those tiny moments feel absolutely monumental.
So, when you add it all up, All these forces of repulsion and attraction, the ice and the fire, the crushing silence, it brings us to the ultimate question for their future. Can any of this actually last? Is it even possible for them to find some kind of equilibrium?
And this, right here, is the heart of the entire series, isn't it? Can these two powerful, opposing forces ever find a stable, sustainable state where their careers and their relationship can actually coexist? You know, the laws of physics in their world demand that something has to give. Is the repulsion force of their jobs going to tear them apart for good? Or is that powerful attraction force finally going to be strong enough to overcome everything? That question, well, that's what keeps us all hooked.